Today is one of the very few special liturgical Sundays that Unity churches do. If this is your first time in this church or your first time in a Unity church, you don't get a rock every Sunday. All right, that's one Sunday a year we do this service that we call the White Stone service. And we will get into more about all the meaning of that as we go on. But I do want to say that it is a special Sunday in the Unity year. And we put it right up at the front end of the year because it's about setting an intention of who we are here to be, of who we are. And, very often as we are willing to let go of the past, and those of you who were here with us last night, I think we managed to get rid of at least one thing, one of those fears that may have been very strong for us in this past year. We become ready to claim a new name, to become something new for this new year. And that's what this Sunday is all about. Now, this is not just something that we just sort of came up with and decided everybody needs to write a new name on a rock for themselves. This is actually based in the Bible. And I always like to remind folks of where that came from and some of the meaning behind it. 2 years ago, I unpacked the entire passage in the Revelation of John. It's not Revelations, it's the Revelation of John. But it's in the second chapter of the Revelation. And if you're interested and want to go back to that scripture later on, the real passages are from chapters 12 to chapter 17. But the one that the White Stone is really based on is verse 17. So here's what it says, and this is the Common English Bible, which, as its name implies, doesn't sound anything like the King James Version. This is words that we would all use. If you can hear, listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. I will give those who emerge victorious some of the hidden manna to eat. I will also give to each of them a white stone with a new name written on it, which no one knows except the one who receives it. So that is the scriptural basis for the exercise that we're going to go through today. Now, a couple of years ago, what I did was I spent my time before we did the actual White Stone piece unpacking what that entire scriptural passage, verses 12 through 17, mean. And it's fascinating. The metaphysical interpretation of that is very illuminating. But we're not going to do that today. And then last year, what I did was took a look at when it says in the verse that to those who emerge victorious, in some of the older translations of the Bible, it says to those who overcome. And in Unity, we have some teachings that are specifically designed to assist us in being overcomers or in overcoming. And I talked about those a lot last year. So, Reader's Digest version of those past 2 years. First of all, the White Stone itself metaphysically represents purity or a clean slate. And the idea is that it also represents a clean consciousness, that we have gotten rid of that old falsity, that old sin, that old error thought in consciousness, and we are ready to create something new, a new name for ourselves, a name that gives us the power to move forward and do those things that we are called to do. And then the overcoming piece, essentially in Unity's teachings, it says that there are two big pieces to being an overcomer, one who overcomes. The first one is in our conscious mind. And what that is to consciously make the choice to think different thoughts. And, a lot of us may say, that's really impossible, Reverend Charles. I can't make my mind do things. Well, it's just like anything that we do through practice. I could not, for the life of me, sit down at the piano and without ever having touched it before, be able to play a tune. Now, there are some people, like Brenda, who can do that. But I would have to study and practice and work at it a long time. For us, the practice that helps us to work with our minds in consciousness is meditation, right? When we meditate, when we pray, it gives us the ability to exercise a level of control over our conscious mind which is not available in any other day-to-day activity that we have. For most of the time, we are letting our minds, run around off their leash. Right? What meditation does is it helps us to train our minds so that when we find our minds getting into those places that they sometimes get when they're off the leash, we at least have the ability to pull them back and say, no, bad mind. I'm going to think about this. I'm not going to go back to those same old habits that I used to have, whether it's blame or victimhood or anger or judgment or whatever it is. And I know that most of us can identify. Most of us have probably used some of those things, found ourselves in some of those places mentally, and they're not healthy places. Right? So what we do is we choose consciously to change our thoughts. That's the first piece of being an overcomer, the conscious mind using it to change our thoughts. Now, in order to really become a true overcomer, what we have to do then is go in and change our subconscious mind. And that's where that discipline of working with our conscious mind really comes in, because the subconscious mind has certain properties that make it a little more difficult of a beast to tame, right? The subconscious mind is subjective, and that means a couple of very special things. Number one, it's out of our conscious control. We are not the boss of it. We are only kind of the sheepdog of it. We can sort of guide it, but we can't necessarily tell it exactly what to do. The other thing is our subconscious mind doesn't play fair, right? There's some things we'd probably rather forget about. Some things we would rather not have it bring back up, right? It's going to do it anyway until by the use of our conscious mind and choosing to think different new thoughts, we, soak it with those good new conscious thoughts that different things come back out. Last year, the analogy that I used when I talked about this was cleaning a pot. You take a really dirty pot and you go over to the sink and you pour some clean water into it. The first thing that comes out is what? It's pretty nasty looking, right? But the more clean water you put in there and the more you scrub it around, the cleaner the water gets as it's coming back out until finally it's clean water in, clean water out. And that is how we really know we've done the work in our subconscious. Right? We've done enough work in our conscious mind of putting in good, clean thoughts that what comes out of our subconscious is good, clean thoughts as well. So we don't find our mind going into those dark places the way that once upon a time it did. And that is when we are an overcomer. That is when we begin to eat of that hidden manna. And that is when we get that new name that is known only to us and to God. This year, what I want to talk about, though, is something a little different, and that is the power of that new name. You see, a name is generally tied to a phrase, and that phrase begins with the words, I am. When I say I am Charles, I have some idea what that means. And I actually have several different names. I am Charles. I am CP. I am Reverend Charles. I am Chief Perry. I am Dad. And a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And when I say them, they affect me. Trust me, it is different when I say I'm Dad than when I say I'm Chief Perry. You feel that? It's that fast for me. All right? I am is a very special three-word. It's probably the most powerful three letters in the English language. 2 words, 3 letters. It's essentially the name of God. And the story goes that when Moses is leading the Israelites out of Egypt, and the Israelites are getting kind of grumpy. because they're not getting fed well, they don't have enough water, they don't know where the promised land is, they've been out there for a long, long time in the desert. How many of you guys like to camp? Not everybody, okay? I will tell you, as somebody who has spent 30 years in the National Guard, the bloom's kind of off that rose for me. I've spent enough time outdoors, in unpleasant situations that I'm not so big on it. So can you imagine being out there for like 20, 30, 40 years camping, right? You probably need a real good bath. So they're upset. They're like, who's telling you to lead us around out here in the middle of nowhere? So Moses is talking with God. He says, God, okay, I don't need much, but I got to tell them who you are. I need a name. And God at first doesn't want to give Moses a name. And Moses, no, really, these people they're going to leave. They'll go back to Egypt, for crying out loud. And God finally says, okay, you tell them, I am that I am sent you. Kind of sounds like Popeye. I am what I am, right? I am that I am. And that name of God is powerful. It's powerful magic, if you want to think of it as magic. Because when we say, I am something, it changes who we are and it changes our reality. It literally changes how we see, how we interact, and how we manifest the things that we do. One example that has come to me recently, and it comes back to our relationship with God, is I know that there are some folks who have a little difficulty with the way that we do Unity's prayer for protection at the end of our service. And I want to unpack a little bit of that and what that means. So the prayer for protection, everybody who's been in Unity for a while knows it, right? The light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, the presence of God watches over us, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When I first got here, everybody had been doing that for a long time, like they do in most Unity churches. And at that point, Christine and I had a long talk about it, and we stopped doing that. What most people in Unity do not know is that the prayer for protection was written by Jim Freeman for soldiers going into combat in the Second World War. I did not want to affirm that for you guys. I did not want to affirm that you needed a prayer that guys who were about to go get shot at would say before you walked out those doors. That didn't feel right to me. So we stopped doing it. And, different people would from time to time say, well, why don't we do the prayer for protection? But not a lot. And finally, I got into a discussion with one of our longtime members about it. And she said something that I kind of had to think, She said, well, Reverend Charles, we go out into spiritual combat every day. And, as someone who's been in recovery for a few 24 hours, I know what that feels like. And I said, okay, I can work with that. Let's see what I can come up with that actually feels right. So as we look at that prayer, right, the light of God surrounds me, the love of God enfolds me. It was written quite some time ago, and the language that it was written with was very old Unity language that still sounded a lot like separation language. In other words, that we are somehow separate from God. And remember, if we go back to Unity's first and second principles, Unity's first principle is that God is all things. God is in all things. God is all things are God. Right? The universe, everything in it, all that lies behind it, and the laws by which it operates. It's all God. All right? Which leads us to our second principle, that because we're something that's in that universe, that means us too. God is in us, as us, through us, living us. We are the living, leading edge of God. One of the analogies I use for that is it's like God is a body and we're maybe a blood cell. We're like a blood corpuscle. We aren't the whole body, but we are the body. And while the body may not be conscious of what we're doing all the time, it sure doesn't want us to get hurt. I don't like losing any blood, do you? you know. I get very concerned. All right? And for today's piece, the analogy that I came up with is kind of like when I say that I am the power of God. And I know some of you probably have a tough time saying that. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand. Some of you may have a tough time saying, I am the power of God. Right? That's an extremely powerful affirmation, and one that I hope we can all learn to use. But look at it like this. Let's say God's a bulldozer, great big bulldozer, all right? I am one molecule of iron on the edge of one of the teeth on the blade of the bulldozer, okay? I'm certainly not the whole bulldozer, right? But I am the bulldozer. I'm part of the bulldozer. I'm in there, all right? And at some point, it is certainly possible that the entire power of that bulldozer might be focused on my one little molecule of iron. Right? So while normally it's going to be spread out, right, across the whole blade, there may be a moment in time when the only thing that's, pushing that dirt's me. But I have the power of all the rest of that thing behind me as I do that. I am the power of God. Right here, right now, in the flesh. That's why I'm here. When we claim that, it creates a whole different dynamic. I am the light of God. I am the love of God. I am the power of God. I am the presence of God. Wherever I am, God is. And that means more than just even if I'm marooned in space, surrounded by vacuum, that God will find me out there. God's already there. God's there in the photons that are beaming through from all the stars billions of light years away. God's there in the dark matter, and God is there as me. Do you get that? I am. So whatever it is that we follow those magical words with, whatever we say after we say I am, has tremendous power. It shapes who we are. It shapes how we interact with the world. Now, I have to bring in Unity's fifth principle when I talk about this a little bit, because when we say, I am whatever it is not enough merely to think it and say it. We then have to put feet to our I am. We have to live in integrity. And hopefully it is going to be that which leads us. If I say I am whatever it is, hopefully that's going to affect the way that I live. There are times when it's easier to let our feet lead the way. In my other spiritual family, sometimes we say it's easier to act your way into right thinking than it is to think your way into right acting. Right? So while we can say, I am so-and-so, and let that lead us somewhere, sometimes we have to go somewhere and let that lead us to who we are. We have to get started on the work and then find our way. And I know that where I was 14 years ago, that was something that I had to do. I simply had to do what all those nice people told me and then try to figure out who I was. But what was interesting is that in order for me to even be able to get started, I had to do something that was very difficult for me to do. I had to stand up in front of other human beings and say, my name's Charles, and I am an alcoholic. There are a lot of people that have an issue with that. They don't like saying those things. They say, I don't want to affirm that. And to them, I would say, well, okay. But before we can begin to change, we need to know where we're started, right? It's like when you go onto Google Maps and you're getting directions. What's the first thing you got to do? You got to tell Google Maps where you're at. Otherwise, it's not going to know how to get you to wherever it is you're going to. Although now, it's kind of scary. Sometimes Google Maps does know where you are. That's a little concerning, right? But you got to know where you're at. But today, when I introduce myself, I say, my name's Charles, and I'm a grateful, recovered alcoholic. My I am in that place has changed because of the work that I do, because of that cleaning my pot, right? In consciousness. Do enough work in consciousness, it starts to soak down into your subconscious. Next thing you know, you haven't had a drink in 14 years. How about that? Right? That's a miracle. But trust me, I still have plenty of other stuff I can work on. Right? This year I'm working on sugar, which is a molecule that's just like right next door to alcohol. Right? So I want y'all to hold that with me. Right? And if anybody wants to join me in that, maybe we can swap recipes and stuff. All right? I can learn to love broccoli a little more. Yeah. Yeah, I'm still going to, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to say, my name's Charles and I am vegan. I don't know. Well, that'd be a tough one for me. But the truth is, we do get to change the word after that, I am. But the trick is, you still have to do the work. You still have to do the work. This is a different kind of church. I can't just say, I'm saved. Right? All done. Right? And just keep doing what I'm doing. That doesn't work for me. It never worked for me. I never got that. That's why I'm here. This is a little tougher. I will admit. Unity is a little tougher. You got to total load. You got to do the work. But the great thing is it's joyous. I have watched people's lives be transformed by the work that they do, and it is miraculous. It's truly amazing. And much of it comes with simply being able to look deep within ourselves and saying, that's not who I am. I am Christ, whole and perfect. I am the light of God. I am the love of God. I am the power of God. I am the presence of God. I am more than I have projected. I am more than my fears. I am more than my attachments, my resentments. I am more than all of those things that I know it's time for me to let go of. I am. I am. So this exercise, this thing that we are going to do, is a way of reaching out into God consciousness and saying, okay, God, what am I? In this moment, in this year, what is my new name? I'm going to lead us in a time of meditation. The band will lead us off with a song, and then we'll move into a time of meditation. And during that time, you may have something come to you. It could be a word, it could be a phrase, it could be a symbol. but something that, as my old acting teacher Don used to say, something that pinches you, and something hopefully that leads you to an I am that is more, that vibrates higher, that is aspirational, and yet is the deepest truth of who you always have been. So everyone should have gotten a little white stone and a pencil, like I did. Did anyone not get a white stone and a pencil as you came in? If you would raise your hand, our ushers will square you away. And as I tell people every year, it's okay if during this meditation time today, a word or a phrase that has the ring of truth to it does not come to you. Allow yourself some time. Spend some time over this next week. If you don't meditate, just take 5 minutes a day. You've got 5 minutes. And if you do meditate on a regular basis, I invite you to, if you have a blank stone at the end of the service, take your stone with you into meditation and see what comes to you. The other thing that I like to say is that you're not necessarily stuck all year with the same word. This stone has 6 sides. So there's a lot of room for growth. Okay? So keep your stone with you this year. And if at some point, put it on your bathroom mirror, put it on your dashboard, put it someplace where you see it. You can put it in a pocket or put it in your purse, but go back to it. And if at some point that word doesn't seem to fit, or it doesn't seem to be what you really are holding in your heart, it's who you truly are, just turn it over, spend some time, and come up with a new word, a new I am. We are constantly changing and evolving. And this is a reminder. Because sometimes we need reminders of who we are.